Demon's Souls is a puzzle game, and here's why. Puzzle games make up a genre of video games that emphasise puzzle solving. The types of puzzles may include problem solving, pattern recognition, sequence solving, and logic-based testing. And I consider the boss design of Demon's Souls to meet all of these criteria. And you could actually take that farther than just the boss design, it's just that for this video, that's all I want to talk about. So you might be wondering how I even played this game, and well, after a lot of battling with online queues, scalpers, and tens of thousands of other gamers who were trying to get their hands on a PS5 recently, I managed to snag one off the Amazon store, and gratefully so. In playing the game, I noticed one thing in particular that made Demon's Souls stand out from the competition: its approach to boss design. Unlike much of the other Souls games, meaning Dark Souls 2, 3 and 1, the bosses in this first iteration of the Souls formula are very, very different. And in this video, one of the things I want to do is explore why and explore how. So to start, taking for example Dark Souls 3, of its 19 main game bosses, 10 of those are knights, or something amounting to that bodily structure. Now, take for example Demon's Souls, with its 20 bosses, only 5 of which can be fairly described as knights, which leaves us with the remaining 15 that are all very uniquely designed. It's fascinating to see what Demon's Souls does with these remaining 15 bosses. They vary from the eagle-headed adjudicator, who can only be damaged by first finding his weak spot on his belly and side, to the ingenious phalanx. Subtle hints are dropped throughout 1-1 of a weakness to the flame, meaning those who have paid attention are rewarded in the final boss of that level. And then at the final boss, you must first destroy the phalanx to reach its weak and defenseless heart. The phalanx is an excellent example of what I'm talking about when I say that Demon's Souls is a puzzle game. Pattern recognition is required to notice the fact that all of those little flame-based items are being dropped throughout the level, and that is going to be something that you'll need to use at the end of the level. You also need to use your problem-solving abilities to notice the structure of the boss, see that the heart is weak and there's a phalanx around it, and what do phalanxes do. It's all very clever, but more importantly meets those requirements of a puzzle-solving boss. And that can be contrasted with the more combat-based challenge that you get in the later Souls games. In Demon's Souls, it's not just a combat challenge, it's also a mental challenge of figuring the boss out, and that's why I say it's a puzzle. And that figuring out can be on multiple levels. It can be more simple, like with the adjudicator, in the sense that you can only hit him in the head, and that takes a few minutes of problem solving. Or it can be more complicated and it can be drawn throughout the level, like it is with the phalanx. It does vary from boss to boss, but that doesn't change the fact that those other 15 bosses, on some level or another, integrate those parts of problem solving. And even the knight bosses do integrate it, in the sense that pattern recognition is a central element of any Souls boss, particularly knight-based bosses, where you have to fight them, learn their moves, and die, rinse, repeat, until you finally win. And another recurring theme that is drawn throughout many of the Souls games, but is particularly apparent in Demon's Souls, is weak spots and completing an action to reach them, which essentially negates the boss. Take for example the Dragon God boss fight and the ballistas that you need to use to take him down. This is also an example of sequence solving, in the sense that you need to complete actions in a certain order in order to take the boss down. Now that I feel it's been fairly established that Demon's Souls is at least on some level a puzzle game, I think it'd be interesting to look at how and why this happened. And I feel that the best way to understand this is to look at the storied history of the game, as this provides valuable insights into how this occurred. The man behind it all was, of course, Hidetaka Miyazaki. At the time the plans were agreed to create Demon's Souls, it was envisioned as a competitor for the Elder Scrolls games, and Miyazaki was working on the latest Armored Core game. Whilst working on Armored Core, Miyazaki heard through the grapevine of a new fantasy-type game beset with issues that was verging on collapse. Miyazaki himself had said that something like the Demon's Souls project was that opening that I'd always been waiting for. In spite of its issues, Miyazaki, likely already overworked, took on a second directorship with the core aim of saving the sinking ship that was at that time Demon's Souls. Although immediately it may sound like a bad thing that Demon's Souls was a failure when Miyazaki took over, the importance of this for the creative direction of the game cannot be understated. This is because it essentially gave Miyazaki a blank creative check to try anything that he wanted with the game. As he put it himself, "If ever my ideas fail, nobody would care, as it was already a failure." A few key changes to the game can clearly be attributed to Miyazaki, namely, moving away from being an Oblivion clone, largely by changing the camera angle to third person as opposed to first. He justified this by, in essence, arguing that Demon's Souls needed to be unique in order to compete, and he was pretty clearly right. The next significant change can be described as the joy of thinking. That is, the feeling of where to next, and making the player decide what to do. This is so clearly drawn throughout the game, and is obviously reflected in the boss design, in encouraging the player to assess the boss rather than just spam attacks, to find its weakness and exploit it. Taking this further, Miyazaki said their aim was to create a sense of accomplishment, and obviously this is reflected in the difficulty, obviously, but also through unravelling and solving the puzzle that the bosses in the game are. Of equal importance was the concept of death as a tool for learning. Every life, and therefore every death, is a chance to learn, better your strategy, and discover something new about the boss. Interestingly, and almost comically, this was largely hidden from the publishers, Sony, due to fears that they would, quote, run a mile. I'm just glad Miyazaki had the sense to hide it from them. As a final point, Miyazaki himself has said that he aimed to make the bosses varied and exciting, and again, that variance is something that makes every new boss a new puzzle, and therefore you need to use those puzzle-based skills that I mentioned at the beginning of the videos, logic, pattern recognition, sequence solving, and problem solving, every single time you encounter a new boss. It keeps you on your toes. Miyazaki has since gone on to say that he wanted every boss to have some different sort of gameplay strategy. The thesis was that each boss had a concept that could be stated simply in a sentence. For example, the Tower Knight could be described as hit his feet, and that thesis is drawn throughout the game in every single one of the bosses, and that creates that feeling of surprise mixed with dread that we all have when we see that boss fog. It is all of these methods to boss design combined that leads to the puzzle style of bosses that we see in Demon's Souls. A simple sentence, a simple weak spot, all requiring the player to think, learn, use logic, their puzzle solving abilities, and learn from death, are only possible because of the unique position that Miyazaki found himself in when he agreed to take the directorship of Demon's Souls. The idea for this video actually started as me thinking that I would do a little top 5 bosses list, but obviously spiralled into something else when I started doing my research. However, I did still want to list my favourite bosses in the context of the notion that the bosses are really puzzles. So here are my top 5 puzzle-based bosses within Demon's Souls, and that was a tongue twister. Number 5 is the Fool's Idol, for a couple of reasons. So first of all, obviously anyone who's played the game will know that as you run through the middle, you can get electrocuted. However, what a lot of people don't know is sticking to the edge means that she won't hit you with those electrocution spells. Similarly, halfway through the boss, she'll start spawning in clones of herself, and the one way to determine that they are not clones is you can see that she fires much larger spells than the other enemies. Now, this may seem like very simple boss design, but it is very subtle and clever and does require those elements of logic and pattern recognition, showing how it integrates those puzzle elements within the boss. Number 4 is the Old Hero, which is one of the cooler bosses aesthetically speaking. Now this boss is actually blind, however when you come into the arena that might not be something that you notice immediately. However, if you use logic again to watch the boss, you will see him wander around as he puts his hands out in front of him trying to determine left from right. And you, as the player, can take advantage of this by walking around him slowly, hitting him once or twice, and then running away. But obviously sprinting makes more noise, so then he can determine where you are. And this is a really good example of just basic problem solving. You can see the boss's weakness, and you can take advantage of that so that you can exploit it and win the fight. Now number 3 is the Storm King, which is a boss which I embarrassingly must have died to 5 or 6 times before I even figured out what on earth I was supposed to be doing when I finally came across the sword towards the end of the map. At that point, things do start to become a lot simpler, but it's very unique in the sense that the game doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't tell you what to do, it just puts you in the boss arena and says, good luck, go figure it out, and because I'm a bit of an idiot, it took me 5 or 6 times. Number 2 is the Phalanx, for all the reasons that I already stated, namely its integration with the level design, as I mentioned, with the items being dropped throughout the level, and the actual structure of the boss, the way it's designed, your knowledge of history almost coming into play into how phalanxes work. And regardless of its appropriateness for a puzzle-based list, it's just one of the coolest bosses in the game, if not the entire Souls series in my opinion. And finally, and probably relatively predictably, is Tower Knight. Now I like this boss for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously you get into the arena and the fat official has brought in some archers to bring you down. Obviously the first thing you need to do is take them out. It makes the fight significantly easier, and then at that point you can go down, take out the Tower Knight, and a lot of people, it can take them a while to figure out exactly what you're supposed to be doing, but his feet are glowing blue, which is just a very subtle visual hint as to what you need to be doing. And then again, similar to a lot of the bosses in Demon Souls, once you've found that weak spot, the fight becomes so much easier, and you get that mental satisfaction of having figured the boss out, as well as the combat satisfaction, so to speak, of actually beating the boss and overcoming that challenge. All in all, I think that list serves as a very useful conclusion in the sense that it's 5 excellent examples of how the boss design in Demon Souls is puzzle based. But on top of that, obviously the historical discussion, as well as the earlier discussion of the game, of the bosses in general, all represents how puzzle mechanics, namely those 4 central elements that I stated at the beginning of the video, are drawn throughout the game. Each boss varies and brings something unique to the table, but one thing that is consistent is death is a tool for learning, and bearing in mind those puzzle solving elements is a recipe for success when you approach Demon Souls. Thank you very much for watching my latest video. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but it's nice to get back into it. Obviously thank you to my Patreons, and if you enjoyed the video then feel free to subscribe. Until next time, see you later.
You